Six Flags Haunted Castle Fire. It was May 11, 1984, and the setting was Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey. Among their attractions was the haunted castle. They walk through dark ride meant to spook guests with dim lighting, eerie sound effects, and actors in monster costumes. This, of course, wasn't a real castle. It was made up of 17 interconnected trailers, forming a maze of hallways and chambers. In the past, there had been smaller incidents involving guests bringing lighters into the castle or employees smoking inside the attraction. On that spring evening in 1984, the park was especially busy. At around 6:35 p.m., a group of teenage boys entered the haunted castle. Somewhere in the middle of the castle, one of the boys either intentionally or accidentally lit a lighter. According to later reports, they were trying to scare one of their friends. Either way, the flame made contact with something flammable, likely the foam padding or polyurethane wall materials used inside the trailers. The fire moved fast, producing thick black smoke that reduced visibility to almost nothing. The haunted castle had no sprinklers. There were no smoke detectors and only limited emergency lighting. Most of the guests inside had no idea a fire had even started, and even those who saw the fire kept believing it was part of the special effects. When visitors did realize the danger, they panicked, and the narrow hallways became choke points. Of the 29 people inside, 8 teenagers never made it out. Their bodies were found clustered together, indicating that they were likely trying to escape but became overwhelmed by the smoke and heat. The teenagers who died were later identified through dental records because their bodies were so badly burned. Most died from smoke inhalation before the flames reached them, but some likely burned to death after being incapacitated. The aftermath was explosive. Investigations revealed a staggering list of safety failures. Park officials had reportedly been told in the past that the attraction should be improved with certain safety features, but no changes were made. The castle also didn't have a proper permit as a permanent structure, which led to confusion over which fire codes applied. Action Park Incidents. Located in Vernon, New Jersey, Action Park opened in 1978 and quickly gained a reputation, mostly for the disturbing number of injuries and deaths that occurred there. Let's start with the Cannonball Loop, a water slide with a full vertical loop at the end. Legend has it that the founder of Action Park, Gene Mulvihill, offered employees $100 each to test it out in the early stages. The result? Employees came out bruised, with broken bones, and in some cases, unconscious. Despite this, the slide opened to the public. Riders would emerge with nosebleeds or back injuries, and some were knocked out entirely by the G-forces at the loop's apex. But at least no one had died yet. In 1980, a 19-year-old employee named George Larson Jr. was riding the Alpine Slide, a ride that consisted of a thin concrete track winding down a mountainside, with riders using small plastic sleds that had no real safety features. George was coming down the hill when his sled jumped the track. He was thrown off the slide, hitting his head on a rock. He suffered a severe head injury and was rushed to a hospital, but died several days later. This was the park's first known fatality. In 1982, another fatality occurred, this time at the tidal wave pool, nicknamed the Grave Pool by employees. It featured powerful waves and an enormous capacity that allowed up to 1,000 guests at once. That year, a 15-year-old boy drowned in the wave pool after getting caught in one of the deeper sections. The park had a habit of hiring very young, often under-trained staff, some of whom were only 14 or 15 years old. Many weren't certified lifeguards and had little to no experience dealing with emergencies. Combined with the overcrowding and unpredictable wave patterns, it was a recipe for disaster. The so-called motor world, on the other hand, brought its own set of issues. In 1984, a man on a kayak ride in the motor world section flipped over and got out to push his kayak back onto course. Unfortunately, the ride's water had a live electric current running through it due to faulty wiring underneath. When he touched the metal surface beneath the water, he was electrocuted and went into cardiac arrest, dying shortly after. And then there was also the Tarzan swing, where guests would swing from a metal beam out over a cold natural spring and let go. While that may sound tame, the shock of the cold water, roughly 50 degrees Fahrenheit, caused several guests to go into shock or become temporarily paralyzed. At least one man had a heart attack mid-swing and died shortly after falling into the water. Over the years, Action Park racked up over 100 lawsuits, countless injuries, and at least 6 confirmed deaths. Eventually, the lawsuits piled up, the insurance providers pulled out, and the park shut down in 1996. Batman roller coaster decapitation. It was June 28, 2008, a hot summer day at Six Flags Over Georgia. Among the most iconic rides was the Batman the Ride roller coaster, a steel inverted coaster known for its sharp turns, multiple loops, and intense speed. That afternoon, 17-year-old Asia Leishon Ferguson was at the park with his parents and a church group. At one point during their visit, Asia probably lost his baseball cap while riding the Batman roller coaster. He and another teen from his group found the cap behind two 6-foot fences, clearly marked with warning signs that prohibited unauthorized entry into restricted areas. Ignoring the warnings, Asia climbed over both fences and entered the ride's restricted zone. He was walking directly beneath the roller coaster track, just past one of the ride's high-speed loops. The roller coaster was moving at nearly 50 miles per hour at that section. At approximately 2 p.m., a train full of riders came around the corner, their legs swinging freely beneath them. In an instant, Asia was struck in the head by one of the rider's legs. The impact was so devastating that the collision decapitated him instantly, and he died on the scene. The ride was immediately stopped, and emergency personnel were called in. The other team who had entered the restricted area with Asia was in a state of shock. Following an investigation, it was concluded that the boy had been at fault for ignoring several warnings. Eventually, the ride reopened after being deemed fully operational and safe. Big Dipper roller coaster crash. It was May 30th, 1972, and a group of guests were lining up to ride the Big Dipper, a large wooden roller coaster that had been thrilling visitors for decades. Originally built in 1951, the Big Dipper was one of the park's most popular attractions. It featured a traditional wooden structure with a large chain lift hill followed by a series of dips and turns. On that fateful Tuesday afternoon, a group of 31 people, many of them children, boarded the ride. It started off normally with the cars being pulled up the main lift hill by a mechanical chain system. But this time, the chain mechanism that pulled the cars up the hill failed. As the first few cars reached the top of the incline, the front cars became detached. The sudden backward motion caused the cars to derail and smash into each other on the track, creating a violent, chaotic crash. Some of the cars were thrown off the rails completely, while others crumpled under the force of the collision. Emergency services were called and arrived quickly, but the damage had already been done. 5 children were killed in the crash, and 13 others were seriously injured. Some of the injured suffered crushed limbs, fractured skulls, and spinal damage. Others were permanently disabled. The wreckage of the wooden coaster was so twisted and splintered that rescuers had to use saws and other tools just to reach the victims. Investigations later revealed a series of disturbing safety failures. The absence of an anti-rollback device, the cars themselves were found to be in poor condition, and the ride's braking system was outdated. The amusement park faced heavy scrutiny, and public confidence in ride safety across the country plummeted. Thanks for watching. See the video on your screen? Well, YouTube thinks this one might interest you as well, so go ahead and check it out if you like.